Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Question Time with myself, Harry Knight. Once again, I'm going to be going through a few of the questions that you've left for me under previous episodes and do my best to provide some answers. Our first question this episode comes from Alberto Tay, which I think Alberto might make you the first repeat questioner of this series, so congratulations. Alberto was asking, since we were talking about wax and grip last week, what my thoughts are on applying a fresh coat of wax before a surf versus using a comb to scratch up the existing wax job. So this is going to be, again, maybe a little bit of my opinion coming in here more than a science. I think everybody has their own idea of what makes a really good wax job on the deck of a surfboard. But just real quick, the idea of using wax on the deck of a surfboard, goes back quite a long way. But late 1930s, probably people started using paraffin wax on the deck of the boards, which it's more like candle wax. It's much harder, much tougher than surf wax. But previous to that, actually, because the boards were wooden, what they've done is, in the last coat of varnish that they put on to protect the wood, they would just add some sand or some salt or sugar or something into the varnish, which is really effective. It's what you do for the deck of boats as well. It's a really good way of providing traction. It is brutal if you're lying down paddling a surfboard. It's just going to rip your skin to pieces. So yeah, the use of paraffin wax was a good step up. Paraffin wax, like I say, is quite tough and quite strong. Sometime around the 60s, they started adding engine oil and stuff to it to make it a little bit softer, a little bit more like what we would recognize. Actually, some of the first surf-specific wax was made by companies like Esso and stuff like that. But modern wax now is very, very formulated for surfing, different temperatures of water, different environments. Around about the 1980s, they started making these combs as well that you could use to scratch the surface. Basically, as the waxes were getting softer and softer and softer, what starts happening is they start picking up dirt and dust, and that starts sticking to the surface. I mean, you can see this one's picked up all the dirt from inside my pocket. So that's not ideal. So and also as they get softer, the surface gets kind of smudged and pushed around. So the idea was you take this comb and you crisscross it and you expose some of that fresh sticky wax and add some sort of texture to the surface. So that's quite a good idea. But actually, at the same time that these were coming out, the companies that make surf wax were continuing to formulate the wax for our purpose. And what you'll find now, in the old days, you used to have to do these circles in the wax to actually get it to start clumping and creating texture. Nowadays, if you just take a block and you just do big long stripes back and forth, the wax will actually start to clump up into little balls all by itself. That's what it's designed for. And actually, one of the problems now with using a comb is that you get all these little clumps of wax and this nice texture to it. And when you drag the comb through it breaks it all up and moves it all around. So my preference, if I can, if the wax job on the board is still in fairly good condition, I will always just add a little top layer of sticky wax to the existing thing. If the wax, if the surface has kind of been smudged around anyway, or if I don't have any wax, then I will definitely always comb it up. I like to keep one of these in the center console of my car just in case I need it. But yeah, if I do have wax, I'll add it. It probably slightly depends where you are in the world as well, because you make the wax harder in hotter water and you make it softer in colder water. Hard wax sticks to the board much better. It's not as sticky on your feet, but it actually grips onto the surfboard much better. Soft wax that you use in cold water sticks to your feet brilliantly, but it also smudges around on the deck of the surfboard, and so you tend to, even your body heat, just as you're paddling on the board, can kind of smudge it all smooth, and at that point, being able to comb it up can be quite useful. So yeah, there's no right or wrong way. Whichever you prefer is the short answer. It doesn't make a huge difference. But it is good to have one of these, because if you don't have any wax, you can always just scratch up the existing wax job and it'll probably be all right for that one session. Cool. Our next question comes from Hual Huayen. I hope I got that pronunciation correct. He's asking about channels that he's seen on the deck of some surfboards around the rails. Now, for those of you that haven't seen this, you get most famously, I guess, is probably Stretch surfboards in California. They've done this for a long time, but if you have your surfboard like this at the deck, you get these channels kind of around the rails like this. They almost look like little kind of handles on the board, which is one part of what they are. If you grip the board, just the ergonomics of it is really nice. It's really like a comfortable thing to hold on to for duck diving the board. If you're good enough, for doing grabs when you're doing airs and things like that, it's very, very comfortable. Popping up even. What they're actually there for is, well, two things. Number one is strength. When you corrugate a surface, you think corrugated metal for roofing, it creates a lot of rigidity in that material. And so by putting in this little channel in the deck, it controls the strength and the flexibility of the surfboard as a whole. And so what you can do is you can make these channels longer or shorter, and you can make them deeper or shallower, and that will actually control how the board flexes in certain situations. So it's quite a clever piece of technology. Stretch surfboards, they were one of the really early adopters of EPS blanks that don't have a stringer in the middle of them. And so this was one of their ways of adding strength and controlling the flex of the board in this way. So yeah, the only real big downside to them is that they're a lot more complicated when you're glassing the board, and particularly when you're sanding that glass job back. Having channels in there is a little bit more complicated, so it'll probably add a little bit to the cost of the board when you go and make them. But they are quite cool, and they do feel great when you're holding onto the surfboard. So yeah, I'll put a link to Stretch surfboards down below. So if you guys want to have a little look at that, then you can do. Cool. Okay, so our last question for this episode comes from Ignacio de la Vega Morán. Again, I hope I got that pronunciation correct. You sound like possibly the most interesting man in the world. But yes, Ignacio's question was just for a little bit of information about the currents that you'll find at a normal beach break. Okay, now this is a good question. It is a huge topic. Okay, there is a lot of information. There's whole textbooks on coastal management and coastal currents. So I'm just going to touch on the basics here. But from a surfing perspective, we need a beach. So if we take a bird's eye view looking down on the beach, let's have our beach here. Okay, and we need some waves. So we have waves coming in. They're going to be coming in straight towards the beach like this. Okay, now what happens is as the waves get into shallow water, they're going to stand up and they're going to break. And the big important change that happens is once the waves have broken, they actually start to push water towards the beach. We've spoken about this in the past. Waves out in the deep water, when they haven't stood up and broken yet, they don't actually move water towards the beach. But once they break and they become white water, they start to push volumes of water in towards the beach. And that's why when it hits you in the chest, it pushes you back. Now, what we start to end up with is, this buildup of water here by the beach. The sea level starting to rise as all this water gets pushed in. Now, water always wants to find its level, and it's going to do that. It's going to follow the path of least resistance. And on any beach, there's going to be an area where, it's not quite perfectly smooth, or the density of the sand is just a little bit softer, and the water is going to find that easiest option, okay? And the water is going to flow back out to sea through that path of least resistance, okay? And that's what we call a rip current. Rip current, not rip tide, okay? Now, our rip current running out to sea like this is literally, it's just balancing out all the water that's getting pushed into shore, has to get out somewhere. Now, as that happens, what we start to develop is this sort of self-sustaining system almost, because as the water's running out to sea, it's going to dig away at the sand underneath it. And so, if we had a sandbar under the water, maybe looking a bit like this, it's going to dig away a channel underwater that's going to make it even easier for the water to flow out this way. So that can become quite self-sustaining. But we've still got waves coming in and breaking here. And so what we'll get, as well as the rip current, we'll get what are called feeder currents. And feeder currents take all the water that's coming into the beach here, and they run along the shoreline and join up with our rip, okay, in order to flow back out to sea. So if you're ever not totally sure, if you're standing on the beach and you're wondering where the rip is, a good way to find it is if you just step into the water or you watch other surfers in the water. If they're getting pulled to the left or to the right, they're almost certainly in a feeder current getting pulled towards the nearest rip. Okay, so that's a good way of finding that. Now, some beaches, these are very, very static. Like I say, as the rip starts to run, it digs itself this big trench, and it kind of always stays in the same place. And even as the tide goes up and down, whatever it was that created this, maybe there's an underwater stream just making the sand a bit less dense there. Maybe there's a little depression, whatever it is, it's always in the same place. You can go to that beach day after day after day, and there's always a bit of a rip there. Maybe there's a big solid object. Maybe we've got running here, we've got a big pier or a jetty or something running out to sea just here. And that is creating, this rip flowing out along it. These are called fixed rips, okay? And they always appear in the same place. Now, the other option is what we have here in Guiones, which is what are called transitory rips. And basically we just don't, the bottom's fairly even. And once the rip's established, it will run out, but it will kind of snake around the line up a little bit, and they'll move up and down the beach. So having found the rip and paddled out, you can't really rely on that rip still being there 30 minutes later when you want to get back out to sea again. So yeah, that's a transitory rip. The other one you might find as well is if, at the end of the beach over here, let's say that there was a bit of a river mouth running out here and maybe a headland running out to sea. Well, we'd almost certainly expect a flow of water running out of the river here and running out along the headland. And so almost certainly the path of least resistance for a lot of this water is going to be to run in, hit little feeder current, and then back out, join up with the river and flow out to sea that way. So that's another option that we may well end up finding. So that's your basic beach break currents. Now, if we just very quickly, just to finish this, round this off, if we zoom out a little bit, and let's look at a big stretch of coastline. Let's take the west coast of France, just because this is one that I know reasonably well. So we've got north here, we've got Brittany, Bay of Biscay, we've got northern Spain, Portugal, running off around there. We've got the UK up here. There we go. Right, so Western Europe. Not the most accurate drawing, but it'll do. And then for this stretch of coast, most of the time what we see is waves coming in kind of from the northwest here, okay, from storms out in the North Atlantic. What it creates is inside the Bay of Biscay here is we tend to see this very strong current running from the north to south, okay? And especially the waves get bigger. This is actually something I didn't say before. Your rip currents, any currents that you have are going to be very tied into how strong the waves are. The bigger and more powerful the waves are, the stronger the feeder currents will be, the stronger the rip currents will be. The bigger the waves are, the longer, the stronger this is called Longshore Drift. Okay, this current that just flows along the coastline. We actually have another one in the UK that flows kind of along the south coast like this. Anywhere that you find this, I know along Ocean Beach in San Francisco, you get the same. Most parts of the world where you find these longshore currents, these big powerful longshore currents, you'll also find some terrible examples of engineering from the last century where we sort of tried to stick groins and rock walls and jetties and stuff out into this current to try to hold onto the sand and stop it moving along the coast. But sometimes those actually create great surfing waves, but all sorts of other problems of an engineering nature further down the coast. But yeah, on a bigger scale, when you've got the waves, or sometimes even the tide, if the coastline's at a funny angle to the way that the tide moves, you can get these big longshore currents that can run for tens or even hundreds of kilometers, and that you're going to experience on the beach as well. And again, that's probably going to create a default longshore feeder current for the rips. Are probably also most of the time going to run north to south in this example. So yeah, anyway, that is a very brief overview to a very, very big topic. I really recommend, if you're interested in this sort of stuff, I really recommend the Surf Science book by Tony Butt. I'll put a link to the Amazon or something down below. Really, really good book all about surf forecasting, but also a lot of these sort of local currents and things like that. Cool. I hope that was interesting, guys. I hope you enjoyed that little discussion. Please, 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 as always, any questions that you have, throw them in down below, because without your questions, I do not have anything to talk about. For now, from me, take care, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.